courtroom was hushed, but the silence wasn't peaceful. It was loaded with judgment. Light from tall, narrow windows filtered in like a spotlight on the accused. Every eye in the room was drawn to the woman sitting at the defense table. Emily Dawson. She looked like the kind of woman no one would suspect. Her shoulder-length brown hair was neatly tied back, her clothes plain and unremarkable. No flashy jewelry, no designer labels, just a pressed gray blouse and navy skirt. She clutched a single worn notebook in her lap like it was her last shield against the world. To the jury, to the public, she looked like a lamb lost in a courtroom of wolves. At the judge's bench sat Judge Leonard Reynolds, a man whose black robe seemed to absorb more than just light. His reputation preceded him, firm, feared, and according to whispers, loyal to money more than the law. He looked down at Emily over his reading glasses, a cold flicker of satisfaction passing through his eyes. He had seen many defendants fall apart on that bench, but today's case was personal. Too personal. On the prosecution side stood Assistant District Attorney Karen Blythe, fiery and relentless. She approached the bench with a stack of documents, her heels echoing through the chamber like the ticking of a countdown. "Your Honor," she began, "we have compelling evidence that Ms. Dawson illegally accessed and distributed classified corporate files belonging to Technova Enterprises." Emily didn't flinch. She sat still, watching with calm eyes. Though her fingers trembled slightly as they traced the edge of her notebook, she wasn't nervous. She was calculating. Karen continued, "Bank statements show she received wire transfers from anonymous offshore accounts shortly after the leak. Her laptop was found with direct access to encrypted folders tied to Technova's servers." The jury shifted in their seats. The gallery, filled with reporters and locals hungry for drama, buzzed with whispers. Judge Reynolds cleared his throat. "Ms. Dawson, do you have legal representation?" She stood slowly. "No, Your Honor. I will be representing myself." A few audible gasps echoed from the back. Judge Reynolds arched an eyebrow, clearly amused. "Are you sure you understand the seriousness of the charges against you?" Emily looked directly at him, calm, direct, without fear. "Yes, Your Honor. And I understand the law more than you might expect." The judge's lips curled slightly, a mocking grin forming. "Very well, but don't expect this court to go easy on you just because you chose to stand alone." Emily didn't respond. She merely sat down, opened her notebook, and began writing. Not pleading, not defending, preparing. She knew this was no ordinary case. She knew she was being framed. But she also knew something no one else in that courtroom did. She wasn't just a defendant. She was a legal genius. And she was just getting started. The courtroom doors creaked as the bailiff entered with a fresh batch of documents. Emily's eyes followed every movement, but she said nothing. She could feel it, the trap was tightening. Prosecutor Karen Blythe stood confidently, her voice crisp and theatrical. "Members of the jury," she said, holding up a printed email. "This is the smoking gun." The screen behind her lit up with a projected image of an email that looked damning, sent from Emily's account to a whistleblower website with attachments clearly marked. Technova, Internal Strategy, Confidential PDF. Karen turned toward the jury. She sent classified files to an anonymous server and then tried to erase her digital footprint. But we have the server logs, the timestamps, the IP address. Even her VPN wasn't enough to hide this betrayal. The jurors exchanged glances, some nodding unconsciously. The weight of evidence seemed impossible to counter. Emily leaned forward, skimming the printed copy on the screen. Her face remained unreadable, but behind her calm eyes a storm was brewing. Something didn't add up. The email format was wrong, too clean, too generic. She knew her own writing style. Someone had forged it, poorly. But Judge Reynolds leaned forward, visibly pleased. "This seems straightforward, Ms. Blythe." Karen nodded confidently. "And there's more, Your Honor." She clicked to the next slide. Bank statements filled the screen. Offshore accounts transferring $120,000 to a newly opened account under Emily's name. Fraud, theft, cybercrime, all wrapped into one, Karen declared. A woman with no formal job in years suddenly receiving six figures from the Caymans? The camera flashes from the press gallery intensified, capturing every humiliating detail. Emily remained silent. Judge Reynolds turned to Emily almost smugly. Do you still wish to represent yourself? She stood slowly. Yes, Your Honor. I have no objection to the prosecution's performance, but when it's my turn, she paused, I'll present the truth. A low murmur spread through the courtroom. What no one knew was that Emily had seen this tactic before. Years ago in law school, she'd exposed a professor's corporate cover-up using digital forensic methods that most students had never even heard of. She was a prodigy once, a rising star. But tragedy stole her spotlight and buried her in silence. Until now. She sat back down, her hands no longer shaking. The judge and the prosecutor had underestimated her. That was their first mistake. Their second mistake, leaving her alive in a courtroom with a legal mind sharper than any of their lies. Day 3. The courtroom was packed now, standing room, only. Local news vans lined the streets outside, and social media buzzed with hashtags like Emily the Hacker and Drawers Small Town Scandal. But Emily sat like a calm sea before the storm. Judge Reynolds entered and took his seat. Ms. Dawson, he said with theatrical annoyance, if you still intend to represent yourself, the floor is yours. Emily rose. She placed her notebook on the table and approached the jury, her voice composed but piercing. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm not here to beg. I'm here to explain what no one else has even tried to understand. Karen Blythe rolled her eyes. Emily clicked her remote and displayed the so-called email evidence. She circled several lines in red. These headers are fabricated. No encryption signature, no domain traceability. This isn't real data. It's an imitation created by someone who knows enough to deceive, just not enough to fool an expert. The courtroom stilled. Judge Reynolds cleared his throat. Are you suggesting this court admitted forged evidence? Emily turned to him. I'm saying someone handed it to you and you never asked where it came from. She flipped to the next slide. Server logs. This IP address supposedly used by me, it's a spoofed node from a coffee shop in Ukraine. And the account the war money went into, I had it frozen last week. Guess what? I never opened it. Whispers exploded in the courtroom. Emily stepped forward. I filed a FOIA request on Technova 2 months before this trial. I discovered they had ongoing SEC violations hidden behind NDA threats. I didn't leak their data. I was investigating their crimes. And this trial, it's not about justice. It's about burying the truth and silencing a threat. Judge Reynolds. Face turned red. You're out of line. Emily leaned in. No, Your Honor. You are. A hush fell. The jury was stunned. The reporters typed furiously. Emily took a deep breath. I may look simple, but I spent 10 years studying law, graduating top of my class, working in forensic legal research. I left it behind for peace. But peace won't save you when the law turns into a weapon. She turned to the courtroom gallery. You wanted a hacker. You accused a thief. But what you really summoned was a legal genius you underestimated from the very first moment. As she returned to her seat, silence reigned, but the tide had shifted. Judge Reynolds knew it, Karen Blythe knew it, and soon the world would too. The morning of day 5 was different. Emily arrived at court not in the modest gray outfit she had worn every day before, but in a tailored navy suit, sharp and crisp. Her hair was pinned back, glasses gleaming under the fluorescent lights. There was no longer a trace of hesitation in her posture. She walked with the confidence of a storm about to break. The crowd outside had doubled. Headlines had started shifting from suspect in high-profile cyber leak to self-represented woman dismantles case piece by piece. People began to question what was really happening in that courtroom. Inside, Karen Blythe shuffled through her notes with a nervous energy. Her case, once solid as steel, was crumbling with each minute Emily stood at the podium. Judge Reynolds looked tired, tense. He hadn't expected the trial to stretch this far, or for the narrative to flip so violently. Emily rose. "Your Honor," she said clearly, "I would like to call a surprise witness." Reynolds sat up. "You didn't submit a witness list. I filed a motion at 7:59 a.m. under emergency discovery. Given the new digital evidence that discredits the original charges, the witness is now legally admissible." Reynolds scowled but couldn't argue. "Proceed." The doors opened, and in walked Daniel Greaves, former IT security chief at Technova. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Karen's eyes widened. "He's not available to testify. He's under investigation." "No longer," Emily replied. "He turned whistleblower this morning, and he brought backup." Daniel took the stand. His voice shook at first, but Emily steadied him. "I was ordered to fabricate digital files," he confessed. "They wanted someone to take the fall in case the SEC dug too deep. Emily found traces in the metadata, and that's when the board panicked. The judge was involved in covering it up." Silence. Then thunder. Emily turned to the screen and displayed private email chains, obtained legally through Daniel's insider credentials. One message stood out. "Ensure Dawson is silenced before the internal audit leaks. Use Reynolds, he owes us." The courtroom exploded. Reporters ran for the exits, cameras rolling. Judge Reynolds pounded his gavel. "Order! Order!" But his voice no longer held power. Emily faced him not with anger, but truth. "You tried to bury me. You let a corporation manipulate your bench, your power, but justice isn't yours to sell." Court security moved in. Judge Reynolds' face had gone pale. "I want this evidence submitted to the Attorney General's office," Emily said, calmly, effective immediately. Reynolds could say nothing. His world was unraveling. What he thought was a quiet cover-up had just become a national scandal. And Emily? She had just taken down a corrupt judge and a billion-dollar fraud ring, armed. With nothing but her mind, her courage, and the truth. Weeks later, Emily sat on the steps outside the courthouse, the same courthouse that had nearly become her grave. Only now, it was a monument to her strength. Camera crews gathered, but she no longer avoided them. Headlines blared. "Legal genius destroys. Corrupt trial from the inside. Judge Reynolds under federal investigation. Emily Dawson declines millions. Opens pro bono legal center instead." An interviewer approached her. "Ms. Dawson, you could be on the cover of Time. Harvard's offering you a professorship. Why turn it all down to help others?" Emily smiled softly. "Because somewhere right now, another woman is being silenced. Another innocent person is being told they don't matter. I was almost erased by the system. Now I plan to fight it from the inside." The camera panned out. She wasn't a victim anymore. She wasn't a defendant. She was a symbol. In a world where power silences truth, Emily Dawson became the voice that couldn't be shut down. And as her story spread, across cities, across screens, across hearts, one truth stood above all. Never underestimate a woman with nothing to lose, especially when she's a legal genius.